I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died.
When word first hit the city that 15-year-old Aria Velasquez had been found, her body discovered fully decomposed inside Jalen Cruz's electric sedan, nobody believed the story was real. But now, federal investigators have dropped new evidence that completely flips the case on its head, clearing Jalen's name and pointing toward a new suspect no one saw coming. The kind of name that makes you question everything you thought you knew. See, when the streets started buzzing and social media lit up, most people missed the real story while rushing to post their hot takes. Because the truth, the hard evidence, was whispering something totally different from what went viral on everyone's timeline. Let's rewind. September 8th, 2025. Workers at a towing yard on Melrose Avenue caught a whiff of something foul coming from a black 2023 Maltese X3 that had been impounded just days earlier. Turns out that ride had been sitting abandoned in the Hollow Crest Hills, one of the city's richest neighborhoods, for nearly a month before it got hauled away. Nobody there lets a car sit like that, not in a zip code where one flat tire gets noticed. When cops popped the front trunk, what owners called a frunk, what they found was straight nightmare fuel.
Michael, a situation that you actually caught us up on last week involving the pop singer David and Celeste Rivas, who's this 17-year-old, and her body was discovered, if memory serves, in the trunk of a Tesla that was found in a rental car lot in California.
Yeah, and even more tragic, she was 15 now, and when she went missing, she was only 13 years old. She went missing in April of 2020.
Becomes a key factor when you consider where David actually was, and more importantly, who else might have had access to his car. By late September 2025, the investigation was in full swing. What was becoming clearer by the day wasn't proof of David's guilt. It was the complexity of a situation involving a young woman's tragedy, an accessible vehicle, and a cause of death that even experts were struggling to pin down. Then, on September 17th, 2025, things escalated. The LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division executed a search warrant at that Hollywood Hills rental on the 1300 block of Daney Place, and what they uncovered next would shift the investigation into an entirely different direction. The property in question, a luxury home leased by David's manager, Josh Marshall, for around $20,000 a month since February 2024, suddenly became ground zero for detectives. They combed through every inch of that Hollywood Hills estate, searching drains for traces of blood, collecting DNA samples, and seizing multiple electronic devices, including a laptop slated for deep forensic analysis. But here's where things start getting real intriguing.
So what inspired the hook, "In the back of my mind you died," is kind of like the storytelling aspect of the lyrics that came before it, in a way that it builds up to the big moment where she died in the back of my mind. I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear. I've seen people online take different meanings and interpretations from that one part of the song where it's like it's their past selves that's dying, and they're not even crying about it because they're evolved or become better people or have killed addictions and other different stuff like that. So I think it's very powerful.
The absence of trauma here is massive, fam. In violent deaths, the body almost always tells the story. It leaves behind a physical record of what went down. Strangulation leaves bruising around the throat. Blunt force trauma shatters bones. Stabbings and gunshots carve their signatures into flesh. But in Celeste's case, none of that. That total lack of physical injury, paired with the deferred cause of death awaiting toxicology, paints a picture far removed from the brutal murder scene people online have been screaming about. Now, before jumping to conclusions, you gotta look closer at Celeste's past, because that context might change everything. She had a documented history, but even the people defending David started catching heat. Fam Jason Lewine, one of the first to speak up, publicly said David wasn't a murderer. But when new circumstantial details surfaced, that stance came back to bite him. Fellow streamer Rain later jumped in, defending Jason's initial reaction. He argued that standing by your homie before any hard evidence drops is understandable, but doubling down after evidence starts surfacing? That's where things get tricky. Meanwhile, the Tesla became the centerpiece of the entire case. These cars ain't just vehicles, they're rolling surveillance systems. With Sentry Mode cameras, GPS logs, and detailed internal diagnostics, Every move gets recorded. Former TV personality DJ Academics even pointed out that if David were actually involved, it would have been an incredibly foolish choice, committing a crime in one of the most traceable vehicles ever made. His words hit hard. That car tells on you, which means, in theory, the truth shouldn't be hard for investigators to uncover. As we moved into late September and early October 2025, the fog started to lift. A clearer and far more tragic picture began to take shape. This wasn't looking like a premeditated murder anymore. Instead, the evidence was pointing towards something darker but less deliberate, a devastating mix of a vulnerable teenager, substance abuse, and a chain of bad decisions that spiraled completely out of control. Forensic scientist Dr. Amy Santoro kept doubling down on this perspective. In multiple breakdowns posted across early October, she explained that investigators now strongly suspected Celeste had died from a drug overdose. And if toxicology confirmed that theory, David would likely not face homicide charges, because the cause of death would stem from accidental or self-inflicted means, not foul play. That interpretation lines up perfectly with what we already know: the absence of trauma on the body. Celeste's repeated pattern of running away and staying in random spots, and the extreme difficulty in pinpointing cause of death due to advanced decomposition. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's deferred classification suddenly looked less like hesitation and more like acknowledgement, a sign of real scientific uncertainty, not some cover-up. Now let's break down the vehicle again, because it's critical. Multiple credible sources confirmed that David owned several cars, and this particular Tesla was accessible to multiple people. It sat abandoned for weeks, untouched, during the exact stretch of time David was verifiably on tour across North America. Meanwhile, forensic estimates suggested Celeste had already been dead for several weeks before her body was discovered, meaning her death overlapped with a period when David wasn't even in Los Angeles. That timeline raises some tough, logical questions. If David wasn't physically there, and if Celeste's death resulted from an overdose, then what kind of culpability, if any, could he actually have? Is it possible that Celeste died somewhere else, maybe at a spot where David had stayed before, and that someone else, trying to dodge scrutiny, moved her body into his car while he was gone? Or could Celeste have used the vehicle herself, maybe with others she trusted, and tragedy struck without David's knowledge? When LAPD Captain Scott M. Williams said investigators believe someone had placed Celeste's body in the front trunk of David Burke's Tesla, but that it was unclear whether any criminal culpability existed beyond concealment. That statement started to make perfect sense. Because yeah, hiding a body is a crime, but it's not the same as causing a death. And then came the eerie coincidence that stopped everyone cold. Surveillance footage surfaced showing Celeste in her parents' backyard on September 8, 2024. Exactly 1 year to the day before her remains were discovered. The clip, time-stamped 5 months after her supposed final disappearance, suggested her situation was way more fluid than people thought. She'd apparently been coming and going, even returning home around her 14th birthday on September 7, 2024. That revelation added a haunting new. Ashley Banfield's coverage on Drop Dead Serious pulled back the curtain on just how chaotic Celeste's young life really was. Police had been called to her family's home 11 times in just over a year, including 3 separate visits on March 19, 2024. The very same day Celeste was caught on liquor store surveillance footage sprinting down the street alone. These details don't just fill in a timeline. They paint a haunting portrait of a teenager in crisis, trapped in a cycle of disappearances and returns, with law enforcement constantly orbiting her world. As investigators dug deeper, more layers of complexity surfaced around Celeste's family. Early reports floated rumors that her parents might have been undocumented or had left the country. But News Nation's exclusive records told a different story. Both parents were in the U.S. legally, with social security numbers issued around 2001. A former neighbor who lived near them between 2019 and 2020 recalled hearing arguments over child custody, though there was never any talk of divorce. What emerges is a heartbreaking portrait, not of a villain, but of a fractured family, a young girl searching for escape, and a tragedy that may have been born from the slow, cumulative weight of circumstance rather than a single malicious act. It doesn't make it any less devastating. In fact, it makes it worse. Real talk, Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved better. The legal implications of the overdose theory are massive, fam. Without a homicide classification, prosecutors face an uphill battle bringing murder charges against anyone. Former prosecutors explained that while arrests can happen even without a defined cause of death, the absence of clear evidence of foul play makes a conviction nearly impossible. The concealment of a body is a crime, but figuring out who did the concealing, especially when several people had access to the vehicle, is its own maze. David, through his representatives, has maintained he had no knowledge of any wrongdoing and has continued to cooperate fully with investigators. Meanwhile, speculation online about grooming, given Celeste's age, has stayed a separate but explosive topic. Alleged Discord messages showing exchanges between a user named Celeste and David dating back to 2022 raised serious questions about their connection. But authorities haven't verified those messages, and no charges of statutory rape or exploitation have been filed. Under California law, such charges would apply if a sexual relationship existed between David, then around 20, and Celeste, between 13 and 15 at the time. But screenshots and speculation are evidence, proving that kind of allegation takes concrete, verifiable proof. As of late October 2025, there were no such charges on record. So, what does all of this mean for David's future? Even in the absence of criminal charges, his profession. Ashley Banfield's coverage on Drop Dead Sirius highlighted how police got called to Celeste family spot 11 times in just over a year, with 3 separate visits on March 19, 2024 alone. The day Celeste got caught on liquor store surveillance running down the street. These details paint a picture of a teenager in crisis cycling through disappearances and returns, living in circumstances that repeatedly had law enforcement pulling up. The investigation revealed complexities in Celeste's family situation as well. Bam! Reports initially suggested her parents might be undocumented immigrants who had bounced from the country, but exclusive records obtained by News Nation showed both parents were in the United States legally, having received Social Security numbers around 2001. A former neighbor who lived in public housing with the family from 2019 to 2020 reported occasionally hearing the parents beefing about custody of their children, though there wasn't no indication of divorce. What emerges is a portrait of a troubled family system, a young girl seeking escape, and a tragic outcome that may have resulted from the cumulative effect of these circumstances rather than any single villainous act. This doesn't diminish the tragedy. If anything, it makes it more heartbreaking. Real talk, Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved better than the circumstances she found herself in, regardless of how those circumstances came to be. The legal implications of the drug overdose theory are profound, fam. Without a homicide classification, prosecutors would face major challenges bringing murder charges against anyone. Former prosecutors noted that while arrests are possible even without a precise cause of death, the absence of evidence of foul play makes it difficult to proceed. The concealment of the body itself could lead to charges, but determining who's responsible for that concealment, particularly when multiple people may have had access to the vehicle, presents its own challenges. David has maintained through his representatives that he had no knowledge of anything foul happening and has been cooperating fully with authorities. The online speculation about grooming, given Celeste's age, remains a separate concern that the street's been talking about. Discord messages allegedly showing communication between a user named Celeste and David dating back to 2022 raised questions about the nature and timeline of their connection. However, authorities haven't confirmed the authenticity of these messages or brought charges related to statutory rape or exploitation. California's statutory rape laws would certainly apply if a sexual relationship occurred between David, age 20, and Celeste, age 13, 15, during the relevant period. But proving such a relationship beyond screenshots and speculation would require substantial evidence. As of late October 2025, no such charges had been filed. What does this all mean for David's future? Fam? The absence of criminal charges doesn't erase the professional damage he suffered. His tour remains Ken-led, brand partnerships got dissolved, and his reputation took a major hit. Even if he eventually gets cleared of all criminal wrongdoing, the association with this tragedy will likely follow him throughout his whole career. No cap, but here's what we got to grapple with as a society. Real talk, The rush to judgment based on circumstantial evidence, social media speculation, and the human tendency to want clear villains in complex tragedies. Legal experts like Alexander Kazarian emphasize that despite the circumstantial links, there was no evidence against this man for any crime. LAPD's careful public statements consistently avoided naming David as a suspect, suggesting investigators recognized from early on that the evidence didn't support the narrative many folks assume. The tragedy of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death remains regardless of who may or may not bear legal responsibility. Fam. A 15-year-old girl who repeatedly sought escape from difficult circumstances ended up dead, her body abandoned in a vehicle. Her family grieves. Having launched a GoFundMe for funeral costs and memorial services, community members in Lake Elsinore held vigils describing her as a sweet child who deserved better. As we await final toxicology reports and any potential charging decisions from prosecutors, what's become clear is that the actual evidence in this case, the forensic findings, the timelines, the investigative facts paint a far more complex and ambiguous picture than the murder narrative that went viral on everybody's timeline. Dr. Amy Santoro's assessment that we are weeks away from any charges suggests that even if charges eventually materialize, they may be way different from what many folks expected. The lesson here extends beyond this single case. Real talk. In an era of instant communication and social media justice, we got to resist the urge to convict based on circumstantial connections and suspicious coincidences. The American legal system, for all its flaws and the way it's historically treated people in the hood, operates on the principle of innocent until proven guilty precisely because human judgment is fallible and circumstantial evidence can mislead. When we abandon that principle in the court of public opinion, we risk destroying lives based on incomplete information and speculative connections. The coroner's report remains the key to understanding what truly went down. And until those toxicology results are finalized and analyzed, much of what's been presented as fact remains conjecture. The difference between a tragic accidental death and a calculated murder isn't just semantic. It's the difference between understanding this as a systemic failure involving a vulnerable youth and seeing it as the work of a singular